Sveiki dar kartą, tęsime
Good
nacionalinį
afternoon once
žmogaus
again.
teisų forumą su
We have
dar
come
viena
back for the
ypatingai
next
aktualią
session of the
diskusiją.
Human Rights Forum. We're
Lietuva
going to
viena iš
start yet
nedaugelio
another important
ES narių,
debate. Lithuania
kurioje
is among a few
teisiškai
member states of the
nepripažįstama
EU
tos
which does
pačios
not
lyties,
legally recognize
teisiškai nepripažįstamas tos pačios lyties šeimos.
same-sex
Ir
families.
nors yra valdančiųjų pasiūlymas,
Although there have been proposals from the governing
partnerystės
party
įstatymas
on the law
jau
on
nuėjęs tam
partnership,
tikrą kelią
and
Seime ir
some
pasiekęs
steps have
politinę
already been taken
darbotvarkę,
in the parliament, and it
visgi
has been
vos
included
tik
in
2
the
balsų skirtumų jis
agenda.
nebuvo
Unfortunately,
priimtas.
it has been adopted. It
Ir
has
kol
not
kas
been adopted,
nelabai yra aišku, kada tas kitas svarstymas
and
ir
it's not clear
apskritai bus.
whether the next
Šiandieną
consideration
mes
will
klausime,
be
ar
at all.
rasime sprendimą
So
tos
today we
pačios
are asking
lyties
whether we
šeimų
will be able to
apsaugai
find a
ir
solution to
kalbėsime
the
apie
protection of
piliečius
the
įstatymo
same-sex
paraštėse.
families, and we're going to speak about citizens
Tuoj pat
outside the
pristatysiu
margins
diskusijos
of the law.
dalyvius,
I'll
tačiau
soon
pradžioje
introduce the
noriu
participants,
pakviesti
the
Jungtinių
panelists
Amerikos
of the
valstijų
debate. But
ambasadorių
first and
Lietuvoje
foremost, I'd
Robertą
like to give the
Gilchristą,
floor
kuris
to
tars
U.S.
sveikinimo
Ambassador in
žodį.
Lithuania, Mr. Robert Gilchrist.
Hello, dear friends. It is an honor for me to be here with you here today. This is the 4th year the United States Embassy to Lithuania has supported the Human Rights Forum in recognition of Human Rights Day. Every year on this date, December 10th, we observed that remarkable day in 1948 when the United Nations General Assembly adopted the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The Declaration proclaims the inalienable rights that everyone is entitled to as a human being. It set out, for the first time, fundamental rights to be universally protected. The Declaration has been translated into over 500 languages, 500. It has inspired generations of those seeking freedom, equality, and respect for basic human integrity. And it has inspired me. This year's international theme for Human Rights Day is equality, reducing inequalities and advancing human rights. And in that light, it is fitting that forum organizers here in Lithuania have chosen to hold this panel on the topic of the human rights of LGBTQI+ people and protecting same-sex families. It is an issue that in many ways has seized Lithuania over the past year and mobilized Lithuanians to the streets. During my time in Lithuania, I have seen tremendous acts of leadership and courage, including by many of activists and the leaders of this forum. Even before former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton said in 2010 that LGBT rights are human rights and human rights are LGBT rights, LGBTQI+ rights were firmly embedded in U.S. foreign policy. This is being reaffirmed strongly by President Biden and Secretary of State Blinken, and even recently, on the ground here in Lithuania, by Undersecretary of State Azra Zaya, who spoke out in support of LGBTQI rights during her joint press conference with Foreign Minister Landsbergis. So when I speak out on LGBTQI rights in Lithuania, I'm not just speaking as an openly gay ambassador. I'm speaking on behalf of the United States of America. This is the policy of my government. This approach on LGBTQI rights is not unique to the U.S. Embassy in Lithuania either. Rainbow flags fly at U.S. embassies around the world during Pride Month each year and on International Day Against Homophobia, Biphobia, and Transphobia. U.S. ambassadors participate in Pride marches, and our embassies work actively in support of acceptance, diversity, equity, inclusion, and positive change. Why, you may ask? Because this is an issue of human rights as so profoundly laid out in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It also reflects American values. Opinion polls show that 70% of Americans now support not just same-sex partnership, but full same-sex marriage, which has been the law nationally in the U.S. since the historic Supreme Court decision in June 2015. This progress, however, did not come without struggle, lots of debate, as in Lithuania, and lots of changing hearts and minds. But, as I stated at the Ministry of Justice just a few months ago, more and more Americans realized these facts. that LGBTQI people are not a new phenomenon, nor a symptom of lax mores by society. We, I say, as a gay person, have been present throughout history. We are your friends, your colleagues, your neighbors, your brothers, your sisters, and sometimes your children. That LGBTQI plus citizens, like all citizens in a democracy, seek to live without fear of persecution or discrimination simply because of how we identify or whom we choose to love. That lasting same-sex relationships, officially recognized through civil partnership or marriage, do not undermine the marriages of opposite-sex partners. And that children raised in families led by same-sex parents thrive just as much as those raised in families with opposite-sex parents. This has been shown again and again in study after study. While there is still much to achieve, progress in the US on LGBTQI rights has happened due to efforts on multiple fronts, and yes, over many years, including through laws, court decisions, more accurate portrayals in the media, changes in policies by private companies, the efforts of civil society, and by the courage of LGBTQI plus individuals and their friends, families, and supporters. The issues of same-sex civil partnership and marriage in the US generated similar heated debate and at times divisiveness as in Lithuania. And I will say that once it was addressed in the US, it largely ceased to be a major political issue. Americans simply moved on. An issue that was deliberately used to divide us lost its power and ceased to matter. And I hope the same for Lithuanians. As an American diplomat and as an LGBTQI plus person, I again thank the organizers of this important forum, and I wish you all a very meaningful, reflective, and productive Human Rights Day 2021. Thank you very much. Ačiū labai.
Thank you very much. You have some souvenirs here.
Okay, here, thank you.
Taip, tai buvo Jungtinių Amerikos valstijų ambasadorius
We
Lietuvoje,
had the
Robertas
welcome address
Gilchrist.
by US
Dėkojame dar
Ambassador
kartą.
Robert
Na ką gi,
Gilchrist. We are
ir
grateful to His Excellency
pradėkime
Ambassador.
diskusiją,
And now let us begin
kurioje
the debate
šiandieną dalyvauja.
we're going to have.
Dar pradžioje
The following panelists. Well, just before we start with the debate and introduction of panelists, I'll give some technical details which should be known to those who are watching the debate online. You are able to provide questions for the panelists in the forum website, a special section for the question. I will say those questions out loud. I'd like to say that this
projektą, kuris yra aktyvių piliečių fondo finansuojamo Europos ekonominės erdvės finansinio mechanizmo lėšomis dalis. Ir taip pat galite gauti dovanų, jeigu sudalyvausite tokioje, na, kaip čia pasakyti, viktorinoje. Kiek Europos Sąjungoje yra likusių valstybių narių, neturinčių partnerystės institutą. Tokį klausimą kelia diskusijos organizatoriai ir pirmiems trims, kurie teisingai atsakys, bus skirti organizatorių prizai, suvenyrai su forumo atributika. Gerai, tai kągi. Dabar jau pristatysiu tikrai, pristatysiu, kas dalyvauja. Monika Antanaitytė, teisininkė, nacionalinė LGBT teisų organizacija Lietuvos Gay Lyga.
She's member of the Lithuanian Gay League.
Daktarė Rasa Račienė, biomedicinos mokslų daktarė, vaikų gydytoja odontologė, kuri geriau žinoma turbūt visiems kaip ta mama, kuri stovėjo prie prezidentūros ir galų gale sulaukė, kol ten pakvietė. Tomas Vytautas Raskevičius, Lietuvos Respublikos Seimo žmogaus teisių komiteto pirmininkas. Tomas Bičiūnas, Lietuvos Respublikos Seimo žmogaus teisių komiteto narys. Daktaras Liutauras Labanauskas, sociologas, Lietuvos sociologist,
representative from the Lithuanian Social Research Center. Mr. Liutauras Labanauskas has introduced a very important survey. We have talked about it after the survey has been produced, but I believe that it's worth talking about it once again.
Gal pradžioje pradėkim nuo to klausimo, koks yra ir formuluojamas diskusijos pavadinime. Atstovai, mes juos pavadiname piliečiais įstatymo paraštėse. Ar teisinga taip vadinti, gal jau čia yra klaida, kuomet, kaip sakyti, patys suformuluojame tos žmonės, kaip sakant, pastatomi į tas paraštės ir dėl to
and putting them outside the margin of law, which consequently all the solutions related to equality,
dėl santykių įteisinimo su partnerystės įstatymu susiję klausimai ir visuomenėje priimami taip, kaip dabar priimami.
Painfully accepted in the society. Mr. Tomas Raskevičius, I give the floor to you. Thank you, Madam Daiva Žemytė, for a very well-formulated question. We have to say out loud that the needs of the LGBT community are not limited to the law of the partnership. The law on partnership is aimed at governing the economic relations between the two people who live in cohabitation without having married. When we talk about LGBTQ people, we should be talking about discrimination cases, hate speech in various fields of life, and this is a very complex issue which is beyond the debate of today. However, the law on civil partnership has become very symbolic because we wonder whether LGBT people are worth of the protection by the state. When we considered the law on civil partnership in the Seimas of the Republic of Lithuania, I was shocked that there was no debate about the content of the law at all. The debate was about whether these people can be recognized and protected by the state or they cannot, or whether there is something fundamentally bad and unnecessary. As a young politician, I was truly disappointed by that. At least in our Lithuanian politics, arguments usually follow emotions. Well, you are the person to start talking about this. When this morning we talked about the Istanbul Convention, some of us have observed that these issues are closely related to emotional issues where it is very difficult to talk in a rational way. So, Thomas, could you continue to follow up on the idea? Is it possible to change the attitudes that have been based on emotions? Maybe we have taken the wrong path. Is there any other path in a democratic society than debate all the issues all together until we get bored with the question, until we solve the problem? And I believe in this context, a very good example would be the question, when this law will be submitted once again. I could submit this law tomorrow, but my objective is not only to submit the law, but to get the result. Therefore, in this place, it is very important what is aimed at by adopting the law on civil partnership. So the law on civil partnership aims at providing economic and other assistance and protection to people who are not married. And I'm not talking only about people of same sex. I'm talking about about all people in general, because these people are not commercial, economic partners. They are sharing their life all together. So this is the red line which we have, which we cannot afford to go beyond. Well, we can talk about the definitions about the partnership. We can talk about the people who have submitted the law on partnership. We can speak about the rights to be provided to the non-married couple. But when talking to individual politicians, political groups in the party, we want to hear from them and to clarify and to find out whether we can agree on this fundamental issue or not. So I have not received this answer yet. Maybe Thomas has the answer already. Thomas represents Social Democratic Political Group, and the Social Democratic Political Group has included the issue of marriages of law of safe-sex marriages, but it seems that something has not been going right. Well, I can't apply this quotation to the Social Democrat Party. If you follow the media, if you follow the debate within the divisions of the political group, we do have meetings with the LGBTQ community members. We raise those questions, but when the voting was taking place in the Seimas, our Social Democrats divided in half. That means half of them voted against, while half of the Social Democrats voted in favor of the law. I was the one who voted against the law and was one of the two voices that determined the outcome of the vote. In our debate, I am ready to take part in any debate, just like the debate today, and I believe that this debate can yield some fruits. Since we are talking about the political will when it comes to civil partnership, and that in order to make sure that certain decisions are adopted, they should be accepted politically. So the law on the partnership is one of the topics which requires political will and political courage. You are a member of the Committee on Human Rights and you voted against the law on partnership. So I would be happy to hear your arguments why you thought that there was no need to adopt this law. Because we all want to hear both the sides in order to ensure that we know all the concerns and anxieties by both sides. Well, a very standard question, and I believe that your decision was a very standard one. Well, let's take a look. All the politicians in any type of voting voted according to their will. They had their own opinion. They analyzed the draft law itself. They talked to the relevant communities and they adopted their decisions. So I took the decision to vote against based on three things. First, I wondered what is written in the very content of the law. The second thing was what is the message of this law for the society through the prism of mindset and human relations. So what do we want to achieve by this law and what do we want to, what message do we want to send? Well, could you put it in a more simple way? Well, if you want to read the text, you can simply take the text and read it. But when it comes to the message of the law on partnership, I don't think it's the right message. So what do you think is the message? Our message today is that our society is not mature enough to recognize that same-sex partners are considered as family. Why do you think that is the case? why they are not recognized, or why we are not mature enough. I think there are many aspects. There are some historical aspects, traditional aspects as well, because we have been raised in our own traditional families. Do you want to say that we live in a homophobic society? Well, again, you are using the concept of homophobic family. If I have a different opinion, I am not necessarily a homophobic person. I simply ask you a question. Well, I am not afraid. I do respect all the citizens of the Republic of Lithuania, and I don't want them to be discriminated on the basis of their sexual orientation. I don't want any hate speech against them. I don't want this to be tolerated. Well, I do apologize other panelists, but you represent the other side of the barricade, so I want to hear both sides in order to clarify whether it's true or not. What do you think is the major threat in the adoption of the law on partnership? As I have said, I'm not afraid of anything. I don't have any fear as a politician, but I looked at the content, I looked at the message that the law on partnership sends to our society. We recognize that same-sex society is not willing to recognize that same-sex partners are a family. I told myself before the elections and after the elections that for me it is very difficult to realize that this phenomenon. But this is included in the Constitution. But the Constitution does not exclude, does not define precisely what family is. It does not say that it's between a man and a woman. Well, the family concept says that family is the foundation of the state. And then it specifies various principles. So we can look at the Constitution itself. But if you are asking for my opinion, and why I voted against the law, this is what I'm trying to say. I did not accept the position, and I did not like the idea that the majority of our society does not agree with the fact that same-sex partners should be recognized as a family. So I simply wanted to hear your opinion. It's not about denying the arguments that you put forward. It's very interesting to note that similar debate was taking place back in 1940 when it came to the law on civil marriages. It seems that the history tends to repeat itself. So now let us try speaking about the major hurdles for the failure to adopt the law on partnership. Can we find a compromise? When we talk about the problems that were raised by Mr. Tomas Raskevičius, what are the problems with the content? Is there any possibility that we can strike the balance? So I guess I'll give the floor now to Liutauras Labanauskas, who has carried out the research. Thank you. Good afternoon. I talked to 10 LGBT couples, and I have no doubt that in Lithuania there are many more couples of the kind, but not all of them want to be visible. Obviously, same-sex couples express their expectations that their rights have to be protected. They want to live in dignity, but at the same time they also express disappointment and complacency with the status quo. In fact, not all of the couples, but quite many of them would be ready to accept a compromise on the most ardent questions. As Tomas Raskevičius said, yes, there are some questions related to the formulations, to the wording of the document, to the content of the law. But, in fact, the people that I had talked to, on the one hand, are very happy people who live a very happy and nice life. Some are better off financially. Some are only establishing their joint life. So on the one hand, those people are very happy, but on the other hand, after my interview, when they start telling me what problems they face, they say that they face hate speech, bullying, discrimination, and the other hurdles in addressing their daily problems. This obviously shows that there is inequality between heterosexual and same-sex couples, and this inequality is huge. It's huge and it's painful, and the couples are looking forward to the decision because they want to feel that they are treated equally, just like the couples of opposite sex. You have just mentioned that some couples are ready to take compromise, to accept compromise. What are these compromises about? Well, compromises may be interpreted as some internal homophobia, because people got used to living like that, and they don't even imagine that the life could be different. They have gotten used to living outside the margins of law, and they can't imagine that the life could be better. I think the law on partnership will not include the things that are expected by the same-sex partnership, but still the law has to address the issue of adoption of children. But well, we already know that such families already have children. Therefore, we have to ensure that the rights of those children are protected too. Because now same-sex couples do not have the right to give their surname to the child. They are not allowed. One of the couple pairs in the couple cannot take, let's say, the child from the kindergarten. Rasa, what do you think about this? Well, I have so many ideas, but I would like to sit between Thomas and Liutauras. Liutauras, who voted against the adoption of the law, and Liutauras. I was the one who was rather hostile to LGBT persons because I did not have any opinion of them, because I thought that it was not my life. But when I learned that my own child belongs to LGBT community, as we are used to using this concept, well, I've learned that my daughter loves girls, to put it simply. So I had to go through the very beginning, from understanding what is going on to accepting my child and to taking steps to protect my child. And I do understand their rights to have, irrespective of the reality. Today, I'd like to use the opportunity and to to talk about the one symbol that was used by Tomas Raskevičius in his Facebook account. When evaluating the work of the Seimas, he said that he felt as if he was trying to bang his head on the wall, trying to break through. So he got a bump, but the wall remained in its own place. So I believe that our society as a whole is still too little aware of the LGBT people. They have the image that the LGBT person is a person who is very strangely dressed, who has a very strange makeup, who is a person who is not acceptable to our society, and our society is not willing to accept such people into their own circles. We have to show them that the LGBT people are simple boys and girls, maybe sitting here in this hall, maybe walking past us in the streets. Their life is no different from our own. They go to schools, they study at universities, they are employed, they are just like as us, but they keep silent. And as long people think that LGBT people is something that is not acceptable, this will be expressed by the voters to the politicians, to their representatives. But once people become aware and understand that such children are born in a traditional family, in a family of a man and a woman, because these are just the so-called ordinary families that raise LGBT children. We need to understand that if you have a small child, you don't know who will he become. And if people think this way, then they will have to think whether these children and people have the right to love. I am convinced that each and every one of us is worth of being loved and to love. Well, it may sound strange, but does this person have the right to create the relationship with someone he or she loves, to have a family, and to have someone outside his job, outside his company? Being a mother, I think that such people do not have the right because our society knows too little of such people, because our society does not know how many people from the LGBT community there are. So I do hope that there is more empathy within politicians, policymakers, because the ball is in your hands. Maybe sometimes you will have to go against your own convictions. This week, we had a meeting with a Social Democrat political group, and it seems that we need the first push from politicians so that our society could see that LGBT people are not a threat, that people should not be afraid of the LGBT community. And just because of the fears that are prevailing in society, we are not able to reach the necessary decisions. And if partnership is equal to a marriage, then society will start to imagine that this strangely looking human being becomes a family. So I think that we have to grow our society little by little. When I was talking to Dainius Žalimas, professor, former president of the Constitutional Court, and I asked him, do we have to discuss the Constitution of the Republic of Lithuania in order to adopt the law? And he said no, because the Constitution clearly supports such
netiesiogiai neparašyta, ten taip nėra užrašyta, bet ten įrašytos nuostatos, jos kalba apie šitos dalykus, tai apie tą teisinį, sakykime, kelią šiuo atveju. Ką apie partnerystės santykių reglamentavimą įstatymų kalba Konstitucinio teismo nutarimai? Monika, gal jūs čia
Monica, maybe you could tell about the rulings of the Constitutional Court.
First of all, I don't want to speak about the decisions of the Constitutional Court, but about the norm of the partnership law in the civil code. In 20 years, the society has accumulated certain expectations in terms of the regulation of partnership. Laconic as it may be, the definition can be seen in the civil code, and this is the family relations. In 20 years, we have managed to accumulate certain expectations, and the Human Rights Court in Strasbourg has taken the decisions that are related to the regulation of family relations of the same-sex people. There's been a court case for Italy, and Italy was obliged to regulate family relations in the neutral forms. To regulate the partnership institution in neutral terms is promoted like a rule in the Human Rights Court. In terms of the Constitution, from the presentation of the draft law on partnership, we have seen a certain hysteria in the society and some fake attempts to interpret Constitution. The Constitution can be interpreted by the Constitutional Court. Since 2011, certain rules exist to relate family relations and marriage is considered as one form of a family. We're speaking here not only about the LGBT people, but also women and men who want partnership but don't want to have marriage. So this moment is very often lost in discussions on the partnership law. Tomas Bičiūnas was given a question. Well, politics is not about arguments and facts. Politics is about emotions. I can publish as many decisions of the Court of Human Rights, but everybody bases its arguments on emotions. Partnership law does not speak about family, it speaks about the contents of this relation. Partnership relations do not attempt to change the definition of the family, but a compromise is a two-way thing. Our opponents have to agree. They can be convicted that two same-sex people in an unstable relationship are not families. But I understand that my child growing up in a family of same-sex people lives in a family. This is the pluralism of democratic society. The imagination of my opponents about my family should not become a rule in law, because the constitutions and laws are equal for everybody, and this is the limit when speaking about compromise. Well, this is a compromise which is meaningful because it does not oblige anybody. It does not take away my right to be called family, but Mr. Bichunas is not obliged to call me a family either. So, Mr. Bichunas, all the conflict is set. Well, I hope that you will not get insulted by my question is that your child lives in a two-women family. Is he a family to you, your child? So is your child's family, does your child's family consist of 2 or 3 persons? Well, my child grows up in a family of 2 women. I only have friendly relations with those 2 women, but my experience shows that the diversity of families in Lithuania is very big, and we cannot have one definition for that, because as a citizen, I can take my decision what my family is and what are our relations with the people I love. My question is, do you have children? What do you think? Children and parents are family or not? Well, no opinion is needed. So, children and parents are family. So my question was, is the family in Mr. Raskavičius' case is composed of 2 grown-ups or 3 grown-ups?
Ne, aš tada jums klausimą atgal. Kai yra išsiskyrusi pora ir joje auga vaikas iš pirmos santuokos, ar jie visi 3 yra šeima, ar vaikas gyvena tik toje šeimoje su patėviu, ar šeimoje ir su savo biologiniu tėvu?
Tai va, klausimas į klausimą, negavosi atsakymas su klausimu. Dėl to visuomenėje, kad mes neturim to tokio, sakykime, vieningo supratimo, tolerancijos, ko gero ir yra tas, va toks balsavimas.
In our society, we don't have a unified opinion what family is according to a new concept that we have to develop. So adopt the law, and we will be able to develop and progress, because now we are at a halt. Well, I agree with that. We will do that finally. Well, I do not know what correct option I should choose. LGBT community leaders have said that this compromise draft law, which gives some narrow definitions, is something they don't like. It means that we have the foundation and we will have a building. And I can quote the LGBT community leaders that family and partnership should be considered as equal things. And it is strange. And I want to discuss that. I haven't asked a question. How could you define a family? Are parents and children a family? For example, divorced parents who live with other partners, a family or not? We can discuss, but we can discuss it without leaving these people on the margins. We are not speaking about the concepts, but about relationships and the possibility to get some services, to do certain everyday things that we take for granted. And these things are problematic for people since we don't have the law. So this was my remark about a family. Now about some practical things. When we speak about values in terms of the Partnership Institute, because there are practical issues in terms of the regulation. For example, if you get a credit card, your credit card contract also encompasses insurance, so you pay benefits for this card. But the same-sex family has this card, but for example, if a partner breaks a leg or an arm in a foreign country, the service, the healthcare service, will not be provided to the partner of the same-sex family. In my environment, we have people who don't want to get married. They want to live in partnership, and they cannot do this because it is not regulated. When we speak about partnership of different sexes, these people, these can have their civil relations, but they say, we don't want a marriage. So my question is it about what we want? You have in mind the civil code actually provides for the possibility to have a partnership. Well, you're quite right that heterosexual couples have the possibility of a partnership. All the discussion, same-sex couples can't have a partnership. Speaking about the willingness for marriage, in the age group up to 40 years, there are about 60,000 people who have never married. They include homosexuals as well, but also they include people who live in partnership or as a couple but do not get married. So I do not ask those people why they do not get married and do not protect their interests. But my obligation is to offer alternatives, especially when we hear that there's a need. A few weeks ago, the Court on Human Rights adopted a decision on a couple, a heterosexual couple. This couple did not live in a marriage, and a husband died or a man died, and this partner, female partner, could not inherit the man's property. So, as legislators, we have to propose solutions that would ensure safety for our society. I have some questions to Mr. Bičiūnas. You are member of the Committee on Human Rights, but you voted for a decision that violates human rights or limits human rights. Don't you see a conflict here? Well, being in a committee on human rights doesn't mean that I have to vote in one or another way. But, for example, if you are a conservative, you cannot act as a social democrat and vice versa. But if you come to a committee on human rights, you have to act accordingly. I'm a human being, I'm a father, I'm a husband, a politician, a social democrat, a member of the Committee on Human Rights, and so on and so on. But my existence in one or another role does not oblige me to vote one or another way without analyzing the situation. It does not mean that if I'm a member of the Committee on Human Rights, I have to vote for this law. But very often we vote in a similar way with Mr. Bičiūnas in the committee. So that was my question. Again, one more question to you. My parents are divorced. and my mother has married another man. Are we a family with my stepfather? With the stepfather, yes? There's no, mother has been married to the stepfather, but the surname is different. But the Constitutional Court has said that families can exist in a different form than in marriage. Now I can see that this is the relationship between a man and a woman. Family relationship can be seen there. But is the stepfather family to this girl? It's difficult to answer. Excuse me, please. A stepfather can be considered a family and get different benefits, while in the same-sex couples, the same benefits cannot be received. So this is a proof of unequal opportunities for same-sex couples and for heterosexual couples. But sometimes heterosexual couples not married cannot get certain benefits. Mr. Bichunas, I think that there's much food for thought and much can be done. But I've noticed one thing after my communication with this group of people. Very often, my constituents are very respectful and they do not speak badly about the LGBT people. But they say in the following way, they tolerate, we understand, but we cannot understand why they want to change the understanding of a family, a partnership. So this is what people speak about. So let us answer to those people's concerns. So, well, you'll have to repeat it thousands of times. The definition of the family is not changed by the draft law because the definition of the family is regulated by the Constitution and it is interpreted by the Constitutional Court. Our law regulates the relationship between two people living together, a couple living together. Thomas was asked in one of the programs where he attended before the consideration of that law, is this law that this law is a compromise that further efforts will be made? So this is a compromise law. Well, this is a decision that we as members of parliament will make. Well, my responsibility is to adopt a law which is socially possible. I can openly say that I believe that we have to have marriage equality. But when 94 members of parliament support this idea, and I will never refuse to support the equality of the LGBT community. And today Lithuania has to agree on a compromise law which is politically possible. Maybe you have a different vision, you have a more forward-looking vision. But laws on families with children, on adoption, is something that has to be adopted as law. Are Social Democrats for progressive laws? Do you think that small taxation principles should be first introduced and then progressive taxes introduced? So you should follow the same principle with the partnership law. Now I would like to include other members of the discussion. This is a political decision which is possible, I guess.
When it comes to the future and trying to imagine what might happen. So if we looked historically at the marriage itself, we would notice that it has been changing. It is different from the marriage that it was back in 1940 and that it is now. The traditional family is not that traditional any longer. We can come across with many examples when children are raised by divorced parents, by single mothers. And the concept of the traditional family should also include all those families, because we traditionally imagine some kind of idealized family where a husband earns the living and the mother takes care of all the domestic things. But as I have said, the traditional family has changed. When it comes to the marriage and partnership, well, we should emphasize that the law on partnership is necessary only for, also for opposite sex couples, because many younger couples, at least from what I've heard from my students, so they stress that marriage to them is associated with some patriarchal family and equal roles of the partners. Therefore, they believe that the law on partnership would be very suitable for them, and that partnership itself would be a good alternative for them, because it would stress that partners in that family are equal. Rasa, could you contribute to what has been said? Well, as I was sitting, I was thinking that no one knows what will happen tomorrow. Therefore, it is not right to manipulate and to consider what would happen if one or another law was adopted. It is wrong to believe that there is something hidden in the law. Recently, I was in Brussels. I went to the European Parliament and talked to people who work there, and I liked one idea. The best decisions and the most successful decisions are those that does not fully satisfy both the sides. Therefore, I think that members of the Seimas have to find some compromise for themselves. The same should be done by the LGBTQ plus community, and only then the decision will be good for everyone, because in this case we will have both sides which are not fully happy. Well, coming back to the very law, the law does not prohibit only, the law that governs. In 1993, when we changed the Soviet Union civil code provisions on the criminalization of homosexual relations, no one asked the society whether they agree or do not agree with this. But now we have the generation that has not been touched by the Soviet provisions. Our people now are different. I also talk to Social Democrats. I believe that they are interested in economic empowerment of families. For example, the law in Lithuania has the concept of a young family. It is already a rather neutral one, and it deals with registered partners as well. So we have to look at not only at the values, but also at the practical aspects. And I would recommend you read the book by Robertas Černiauskas, because it very funny depicts that the same, absolutely the same discussions with regard to the law on civil marriage. When it comes to the civil marriage, there are families who emigrated from Lithuania because they failed to regulate their family relations. There are families who live in the United Kingdom, Sweden, or concluded marriages in Denmark. These are all Lithuanian families. So if we brought our efforts together and started to govern the family relationship, we would contribute to increasing our population too. I sometimes read some Christian content, and I see, well, that the number of divorces in Lithuania is very high. And this is a concerning issue. Malta is given as an example because the number of divorces is very low. Malta is also the country that has introduced the most progressive laws on LGBTQ persons, including the equality of marriage. I have a question to Mr. Bičiūnas again. Well, I am ready to answer all of your questions. I don't know why. I wonder whether is it fair that children growing in same-sex families are not equally treated? Is it normal that I cannot take my child to a hospital? Thank you for the question. My answer would be very brief. No, it is not normal, but I guess this is not the answer that the person was expecting from me. All problems are related to all those things in relation to taking a credit from the bank or taking a child to kindergarten or to hospital. I'm not saying that there are problems. I do witness that the problems exist. But what I say that we have to change the attitudes in our society. I would dare say that majority of people still have the concept of a traditional family, just like I do, I cannot fully understand. Maybe we should look at some socio services and to see whether the attitudes of Lithuanians has changed or not. As I have said, it's not normal to have the situation like that because everyone should be eligible to all the services. But is the law on partnership the means for achieving the aim? I'll be very brief. Is the law on partnership is the best form for that? My answer is yes. The law on partnership does not provide for very clear rights and duties for the partners, because the law only provides the civil status, because according to the law, then such people are treated as close relatives. We are talking about the status that would allow people to feel safer in all situations of life. And it is very disappointing that the debates in the parliament in May were lacking. I have a question with regard to the ideological aspect, because this is the answer might be. Some people, due to certain convictions or unwillingness to recognize the changing world, do not see the possibility and are not willing to have the law on partnership. To my opinion, it will be very difficult to find a solution. It's either we adopt the law or we do not adopt. Liutauras, you wanted to contribute. Well, I wanted to talk about the information on the changing families. Well, we do have some information. Our families do change. The Lithuanian researchers have conducted some surveys, and politicians should come to libraries and find evidence-based material rather than be guided by their own convictions. So currently, partnership is competing with marriage. It seems that increasingly more people are choosing to live in partnership rather than get married. Therefore, we should not be talking about the destruction of the family. Majority of the research shown that after the adoption of laws on partnership in Denmark, France, or other countries, had no impact on the number of marriages concluded. So these are two absolutely different processes. Well, I guess we should raise the question of the tolerance of our society. When it comes to tolerance, the Europe Social Survey showed that there is a lot of homophobia in the countries which have not adopted laws on partnership. This says a lot about the tendencies. Tomas Raskevičius, about the society's tolerance. Well, let's imagine. Well, we see that there are two conflicting sides. On the one hand, we have politics, manipulation and theories. On the other hand, is the very concrete facts of the life of the couples and the daily lives of the couples. So I wonder, is it possible to find this golden middle? Because emotional and rational arguments do not go together. When they come across it is very difficult to find a compromise. Again, are we ready for the change? I believe we do have to ask this question. When I began to work as an activist of LGBTQ rights, it seems that there have been magnificent changes over 10 years, because the situation that was back in 2012 and now is absolutely different. So it seems that we are changing very rapidly. But on the other hand, then I was 23 and I am now 33. So it took 10 years of my life for the changes to be made. But do we have the time to wait? So my life, the life of my friends, the life of my relatives is passing by because we are just waiting for something and we don't know what are we waiting for. Raso, how long can people wait? Well, young people are not willing to wait, and they say it's straightforwardly that if we cannot live here in Lithuania, then we'd better leave for other countries. So these are good children, but they leave Lithuania. Tomas Raskevičius, when? This is the question. So when is the law on partnership is included on the agenda? Soon. Does soon mean a month, a year, or 10 years? We will bring this law on partnership to the Seimas once we are sure that the law will be passed. Well, we have met with Social Democrats. We have arranged meetings with other political parties. So we will not stop at that. So we're trying to see what the situation is. Being moms, we do not attack members of the Seimas, and we are trying to find a compromise solution. We believe that we have to be the bridge between the politicians and the LGBTQ community. I guess we will conclude at that, unless you have questions. Oh, well, there is one question, so be brief.
Nežinau, dabar turiu greitai suformuluoti klausimą.
Well, I have to formulate the question. I don't want to put forward all the questions to one person who represents Social Democrats. In fact, I am ashamed that we have to convince Social Democrats to adopt a law, because it seems that now this Social Democrat representative is the representative of some radical side. I have a question to Mr. Raskevicius. Do you think the community itself could do anything to ensure that this law is adopted? Thomas, can you be brief? I believe that the community is putting every possible effort to ensure that the law is adopted. Unfortunately, we are faced with a lot of resistance and very many demonstrations targeted against the LGBTQ community. So I would kindly ask everyone to be patient and to engage in debate, because we are paying the price of our emotional health. Thank you, everyone. We had the debate on the law of partnership. I hope that next time we will be talking once the law is adopted. I'd like to announce that in 15 minutes' time, we are going to have a debate on Belarus Women of Freedom.